Welcome to the Samson Strength Coach Collective. On today's episode, we have Oliver Houston IV, Assistant Athletic Director and Director of Sports Performance, for Lubbock Christian University. Oliver and I met a while ago now. The years always seem to stack up, right, when you think about when you met somebody. But we met a while ago at Texas Tech, and, we talk about his work ethic and how he's able to maintain that balance between his work and life. He's somebody who works incredibly hard. So I think he imparts a lot of really good wisdom in the episode. I think he gives us a lot of really good quotes too. A lot of them I have written down just in my notebook that I keep on the side for show notes. And it was a motivating episode for me. So I hope it does the same for you. As always, thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoy. What's going on, Samson Strength Coach Collective listeners? On today's episode, we have my friend. We met originally at Texas Tech, but let me introduce you first before I get into that, right? Oliver Houston IV. He is the Assistant Athletic Director and Director of Performance at Lubbock Christian University. When we first met, you were over at Texas Tech, and then now just a mile down the road running the whole show. That's awesome.
Yep. Third time back in Lubbock. So, this time on like you just said, down the road, but basically opposite side of town a little bit,
Oh yeah. Very on the direct opposite. I used to live over by LCU, so I'm familiar.
Okay.
And it's a beautiful campus.
Yeah.
So I'm excited. I'm happy for you. Excited to see you in the director role, and I'm excited to kind of dive into everything. So, can you just give me a background of your career and then what's led you to LCU?
So I played football and basketball in college at University of Mary Hardin Baylor. Right out of that, I went to work with the Dallas Mavericks, got an internship in player development right out of college. Did a lot of good stuff on the court with the teams, did a lot of one-on-ones, a lot of skill work, a lot of draft combine type stuff. After that season, I was blessed enough to get a second season with them, but this time in athletic performance. So I worked in the weight room, shadowing them. It's kind of where I got the actual start in strength and conditioning. Then kind of took over a role of catering manager as well with them. So that's how I kind of started with the food side of it and everything as well. After those 2 years, went to Texas Tech with men's basketball. That was the Final Four year that they had, and served as an intern there for about 6 months until I went to the Star in Frisco, Texas. Worked there as a sports performance coach. Had all of Frisco ISD. I got to learn, how to do draft combine workouts with NFL players, did some MLB stuff, did some MLS stuff with some soccer players, but mostly it was all Frisco ISD. Basically ranging from middle schoolers all the way to seasoned vets. Very interesting area and time in that career. After that, was blessed enough to make my way back to Lubbock, Texas, with Texas Tech University, with men's basketball again. Finished out that COVID season, 2020, and the 2021 season. After that, went to University of Louisiana, where I became the director of athletic performance for basketball. I had men's basketball, women's tennis, and volleyball there for 3 years. And then got a call and made my way back to Lubbock for a third time this past summer.
Is third time the best time? Is that true?
I think so. Third time's a charm, third time's a charm. Something keeps calling me back to Lubbock. So I just had to answer that call. So,
well, if it makes sense, it makes sense. Seriously,
Yep.
It's a great town, and full city. Actually, it's not even a town, right?
Yeah.
And I almost would call it like the desert oasis a little bit because it's right there in the middle of West Texas. But it's got everything that you need. I remember my time in Lubbock very highly. Now, one thing I'm curious about is my experience on the women's side at Texas Tech was you could just tell how much the Final Four appearance meant to Texas Tech as a whole, and that just the community, especially with how tight knit the community and the actual university are with their athletic department. How was that experience for you? Especially so young in your career, getting to go to such a high level event.
Yeah, it was amazing. Unfortunately, I had left early on in the season, probably around like November, December. So like as soon as the season was kind of starting, I left and went to that a sports performance role in Frisco, but I guess I left a good enough impact and did a good enough job and provided enough value that, as they started making their run, um, I was still able to see all of the tournament games. I would drive or fly to wherever they were at in the tournament games, kept in touch with my mentor, John Riley. They would give me tickets to the games. So I was still kind of in the locker rooms sometimes and like close behind the bench, still kind of involved, but not doing my actual roles. Um, but kind of on the outside looking in, seeing that Final Four run and seeing that I was kind of a part of that was phenomenal. And then funny thing is, when I got back the second time, a couple years later, they had one of the Final Four rings for me, and
Oh,
I was
wow.
like, man, I only interned for 6 months. Like, I didn't think I was still like a part of this university as much as I was, and I mean, I was blessed enough to have that still. But no, it was an awesome experience. Awesome experience.
That's incredible. And I mean, it's so, as I reflect upon the end of the season, right? We finish up with a one regular season game left.
Hmm.
I think about how important the strength and conditioning realm can be. I think it's easy to just kind of neglect it and say, you know what, it doesn't really matter that much. Like talent's obviously going to be the biggest thing, but
Hmm.
you look at, our season this year, we've not had a game where we've been blown out. Every
Yeah.
game has come down to 2 or 3 really key possessions,
Hmm.
and so what can you do to make that just small difference? And so I love your outlook on it, right? Because you were a part of that. You were the one
Yeah.
who assisted them, especially in the summer training, and especially, I mean, trust me, as an outside viewer, getting to see John Riley's workouts and understanding exactly what goes into them, there's a
Hmm.
lot. So I'm glad that you got that experience at the Final Four.
Yeah. No, it was fantastic. Fantastic.
Well, let me ask about the Mavericks too, because I didn't even know this myself that you were originally on the player development side and then went to the actual strength and conditioning side. What kind of spurred that change going versus player development to strength and conditioning?
So we had actually about 12 interns, 11 or 12 interns on the player development side starting out. And essentially, kind of how they were going about it was it was a pretty much an interview the entire season. They had a entry level video coordinator position that they always kind of had open. And so that essentially the hardest working intern or the best intern that they saw fit would essentially take that entry level position. And I just didn't see myself being an on court coach, an X's and O's type of guy and everything. I love that side of the game. I think you have to mesh it really well to be successful. But I didn't see myself being an X's and O coach. I loved it. My laptop's still full of, you know, meeting notes and all types of video breakdowns and everything like that. But I just went up to the athletic performance coach and was like, hey, I kind of want to do this more. Is there a way that I can shadow you or something like that? And towards the end of the season, heading into summer league, I started timing workouts. I started timing sprint times and everything like that, setting up, tearing down. And he was like, hey, do you want to turn this into an internship? And he was like, let me ask some of the higher up individuals if this be cool with them. And start of summer league, I transitioned to the strength and conditioning side and just ran with it.
That's awesome. Well, I think it's definitely what you were meant to do.
Yeah,
When I see you coach, I know that this is what your calling is. So I'm glad that we got you on the strength and conditioning side.
I appreciate
Uh,
it.
of course, of course. And so looking at all the roles that you've had, you're now stepping into an assistant AD role,
Mhm.
which is a big deal, right? Running an entire department and then also operating on the administrative side as well. What's the biggest differences that you've seen in your role as an assistant AD versus being an assistant strength coach or your time as the director of basketball performance at Louisiana?
I'd probably say off the top of my head, conflict resolution. Um, in the past, there was always someone maybe a step higher than me or something along those lines, or I can take that conflict to somebody else. Here, it's, you know, the individual that's above me is the athletic director, Andrew Sorrell. So it's like, I got to deal with those problems myself, not taking it to him and figuring out how to communicate with the with the sport coaches, the teams. A lot of other things was scheduling an organization of 16 teams. So as soon as I got here, I was lone wolf, 16 different sports, 16 teams, um, navigating the scheduling, the organization size of it. I think that was the biggest difference. Of course, I had to do it with a couple sports that I had in the past, but having essentially one main weight room um, with only 6 racks at the moment, uh, 16 sports, it's not really feasible, So the scheduling and organization was a big, big component of it, and really hammering that was um, the first step, essentially. And then just making sure I stayed on top of the communication aspect with all of the coaches, the stakeholders, not only in athletics, but at the university as a whole. Um, Another thing that I was thinking about was the amount of meetings that I had with donors, or sitting down with professors or just random staff and faculty around campus. The chef, seeing what meals the athletes eat the most, whether it's breakfast, lunch, dinner. How can we make that a little bit better? Meeting with athletic training staffs, and just all those meetings and the budgeting meetings and size of it just was really, really foreign to me. And still learning it to this day.
I'm sure. The donors one is interesting, right? Because
Mhm.
I think about the day we opened the Womble facility, right? Is
Yeah.
that we had everybody come through, and everybody's there for men's basketball. Where I'm not going to sit here and pretend, right? But somebody came up to me and they're like, "Oh, you're the women's basketball coach." I was the strength coach. I was like, "Yeah, yeah," and and turns out she was a massive donor, right,
Yeah.
to our program. But it's like I don't have to worry about that stuff.
Mhm.
Like a donor could come up to me and all I got to do is be nice to them. Like, hey, do you want a snack out of the fuel station?
Mhm.
It's so easy versus being a director. The onus is kind of on you to help, fundraise a little bit and,
Yeah.
understand and be able to express your needs in a way that show how the donor can help you too, I'm sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. And I've shaken a lot of hands, met a lot of people. Um, it's been a phenomenal time so far. But the amount of people that I've met, the amount of new phone numbers that I've gotten in my phone in the past 6, 7 months has been ridiculous. Let me
It's
just
got
say
to be
that.
insane.
It's got to be. It definitely is. But I'm enjoying every single moment of it, learning about the entire environment, different side of Lubbock. Like we talked about earlier. So it's been phenomenal. Like I said.
Well, I'm glad to hear it. Now, can you talk to me a little bit more about the conflict resolution piece? Because I think that's something that a lot of, strength coaches can kind of take for granted in their careers. Like it's very easy if there's a conflict with a sport coach just to kind of, like you said, go up to the next level and go straight to your director and be like, hey, I'm having this problem. Can you help us kind of hash it out? Right.
Mhm.
Or even just I have to keep my director aware of our regular conversations that we have, good or bad, just so he's aware of our relationship. How have you grown in your conflict resolution, especially the first time really having to execute that role?
I think it's still a work in progress. Overly communicate. Something that I was taught in the past from different areas of where I've been, different paths that I've taken. Something that I was taught was gaps in communication are often filled with resentment and tension. Not saying that that was here or anything like that, but I was often taught that the lack of communication in certain areas can be filled with something along those lines. So I've been diligently working to, overly communicate. It's, like I said, a work in progress still. Figuring out how to communicate with certain coaches and how they like to communicate best, but also just learning them as a whole, learning their organization, learning their culture, learning how they want to run things. Because something that I was always taught again was, as a strength and conditioning coach, we're defenders of the culture. We echo what the sport coaches are wanting, the head coaches are wanting, but also we try to, you know, tag team that from our area in the weight room. And I think that conflict resolution side of it is just continuously overly communicating. And I think everyone can improve on that aspect.
No, I love it. I love that understanding what fills the gap if there's a lack of communication, because that's usually 100% what happens, right?
Yep.
If you're not communicating, it's almost always going to go kind of in a negative way,
Mhm.
and obviously the assumption and just trying to think and fill the gaps of what is happening is usually not going to be very positive. So
Yeah.
I love that piece. It's big on the communication, which I think is ultimately probably the biggest problem solver that you can use ahead of time.
Yeah.
Can you give me a success? Like, you've been there for a short amount of time, but give me something that you're really proud of that you've already done, or something that maybe even a small success that you're just like, wow, I'm really glad that we were able to get this done.
Um, I guess so what initially brought me here was, my prior relationship with our athletic director, Andrew Sorrells, but we also broke ground on a new weight room. So that was one of
Great
the,
success.
yeah, so that was one of the main things that kind of brought me here, that enticed me to this role. And we finally got it essentially finalized. We're still ironing out some of the details and everything like that, but going over the weight room design, was able to see it from my mentor, John Riley, at the Womble, like you mentioned earlier. And so having a little bit of a background of that was, I think the biggest success so far is getting those details ironed out. And I guess another success was being able to hire an assistant and getting some GAs and interns in here, instead of doing it all by myself the first year. And, this semester now I was able to get a really good individual in Noah Frederick. He interned under me at University of Louisiana, and I was able to kind of convince him to come along with me as my assistant here now. And I think that's one of the biggest successes as well, besides the weight room addition. So,
That's awesome.
yeah,
No, and I think, first of all, obviously a brand new weight room is obviously going to be the biggest success in my
yeah,
opinion. Obviously, very cool.
yeah.
But then to hire a former intern as well too, I think
Mhm.
is always really exciting. I've got some former interns who I would love to work with again, and it's funny because one always texts me. He's like, "Any job I can work with you," and I'm like, "Hey man, like I'm at a Sunbelt basketball school.
Yeah.
I don't really have an assistant position open."
Yep, yep. It's a little struggle, but I was able to kind of convince him in different ways and everything like that, and gave him some sports. He's a baseball guy, technically, but he's really great at his job. And he kind of said the same thing and was like, "Hey, if we could figure something out, like, yeah, I'd move to Lubbock." And I
Yep,
was like, "Give me a little moment."
we
Got on
figured
the
something
phone. I was
out.
like, "We'll figure something out." So he's definitely making it a lot easier, and helping me develop and build, a fantastic athletic department here.
That's awesome. And so I'm a yin and yang kind of guy, right? Like, I
Mhm.
like talking about the successes, but what are some of the challenges that you face transitioning into this role as well?
Um, I guess realizing, what got me here won't keep me here.
Mm,
That's a cliche term, cliche phrase that people say all the time. Um, it essentially just requires a new level, a new perspective, sometimes a new approach. Um, but something that I always try to say and tell my athletes, or tell, GAs or interns, keep the message the same, just change the delivery. And that's something that I've had to learn getting here. But specifically in this role, finding balance, being more intentional with moments and relationships. There's a little story that I wanted to tell. I spoke at a intro to ESS class when I kind of got here. So, like, maybe back in mm, October-ish, November-ish, give or take. Um, and they wanted me to speak on, like, the successes, how to succeed in this field, what do you need to do, the routes you need to take, and everything like that. And at that moment, you know, that analogy of the duck, where they're calm on the surface, kicking like crazy underneath and everything like that. That was how I was the whole first semester. Starting in July, all the way the whole first semester. So I'm speaking at this class, trying to tell them, like, oh, how to succeed at this field, how to get in this field. And I remember going into it, and I was like, I'm not going to do a PowerPoint. I'm not going to do anything like that. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to be completely transparent with them right now. Took a little notepad, wrote some notes, and was just like, all right, here's what I got. Here's what I'm going to say, everything like that. And in all honesty, the whole time I was going, I started tearing up a little bit, just because it was like, you know, people see that I'm now in a new role. I'm assistant athletic director, director of athletic performance, running a department, building it from the ground up. I was with the Mavs, with tech, all that stuff. And it's like, there's a lot that goes into this behind the scenes, that finding the balance, balancing relationships, being more intentional with moments in relationships. Uh, Early on, like, I was unknowingly you know, pushing really, really good relationships to the side. And it was not good. It was me trying to develop a department and wanting it to be done right then and there was a struggle. And I pushed a lot of really, really great people, away, family and personal and whatnot, unfortunately. But after that class, speaking to that class, a freshman emailed me and came to speak to me. And young man, he's kind of, to himself and everything like that. And he spoke to me and was like, had probably about an hour conversation. And this was like me like coming down now, like, I can't believe I was just like that honest with that class. Like, I hope I didn't steer him away from the field and everything like that. But like he came and spoke to me and we talked a little bit and he left me with a quote and I wrote it down. But he said, nothing has to be perfect. It just has to be the best it can be so it can grow from that. And like I said, the analogy of up, on the surface, calm, underneath, kicking like crazy. And he said that quote to me, and he's a freshman, been at the school for 3 months now. And I was like, that's exactly where I'm at right now. Like trying to develop this university, trying to build an athletic performance department. And I'm wanting it to be done right now. Becoming overzealous, not always a bad thing, but having this vision of like, ooh, now I get to put everything that I have up here into action, and he told me that and I was like, okay, it can't all be done in one semester, probably not even 2 semesters. Be patient, be steady. And that kind of, you know, was the same as the Maya Angelou quote that I love, and it's hanging up in my office back in the weight room. But she says, Maya Angelou says, do the best you can until you know better. Then when you know better, do better. And so that's something that I have posted up on my wall, and literally just staring up from my laptop is right there in front of my face. And it helps me remember, you know, it doesn't have to be perfect and it'll never be perfect. But as long as you continue to be intentional in those steps, you know, you can take steps in the right direction, I guess I would say. So,
Wow. So you kept it real with them. You
yeah,
let them know
I,
what it's actually like.
I had to. Some of them were athletes and everything like that. So they're like, yeah, Coach O, we see you up here 12 hours, 13 hours. Like, you got here at 5 a.m., your car's still here, and we went to dinner with our friends. And I'm like, you don't have to do it that way. If I can go back, I would change a lot of things with the balance and being intentional with relationships, like I said. But, you know, once you know better, do better. So
Mm. I love that too, and I think it gives you yourself a little bit of grace too, right? Because I think it's so easy to beat yourself up and just say like, "Man, I really need to be doing this better. I need to be able to get this done quickly."
yeah,
My own challenge is we've got guys right now. We've got two of them who are in the top 50 in the country as individual players for minutes played. And I'm like,
really,
why are they tired? And
yeah,
I'm like, I should have figured this out, right? And so it's like I need to get this done now. I need answers now. And it's like, well, at the same time, this is a lesson learned. This is how you can get better. And so you
yeah,
should give yourself a little grace in that moment. I guess what I'm curious about too is I know with the relationship aspect, it can be tough, especially with individual relationships with family. One of the things I feel like I need to do better is call my parents every day, right? And
mm-hmm.
try to be more involved. But at the same time, we're traveling every day and I'm trying to figure things out. And so it's a balance that a lot of strength coaches have to kind of fight for.
Yeah.
How do you give yourself a little bit of grace in those situations or relationships where you may have pushed people to the side, but know that you can kind of continue to develop those relationships in the future?
I think not withholding anything. I think going back to what we talked about earlier with building the relationships amongst the sport coaches, I think, it's the same with your family and your personal relationships and everything like that. And just overly communicating, but also being more intentional with those relationships, being more intentional with those moments that you have in those relationships. And something that I've been trying to practice myself, learning more about the work life balance and everything like that. But I had an athlete, former athlete, the other day. It was his birthday, and I was like, "Nah, I don't text him." I was like, "I got a little bit of time. I got probably about an hour in between my next group." So I'm like, you know what? I can give them a 3-minute call, 5-minute call. It doesn't have to be long. Like it just was a quick call. And so I'm like, you know what? Let me give him a call. Called him up and was like, hey, happy birthday. Hope your family's doing well. Hope everything's going all right. Let me know if you need anything. And it was like 3 minutes. And I'm like, that wasn't hard, and that's the balance. That's the intention that, I wish I had been aware of in my previous, you know, experiences, previous places that I worked, and even last semester. It's as simple as, carving out time. Like I said, being more intentional with carving out the time, being more intentional with trying to find that balance of whether it's 5 minutes or 20 minutes or an hour or 2 minutes or just, reaching out. And I think that is how you try to find that balance because everyone's different. Everyone's situation is different. Some people might be married, some people might have children, some people might just be by themselves. They might be in the same town with their family, but just being more intentional with trying to carve out those moments. I think, again, hindsight's 2020. Wish I would have done it a little bit differently, but it's shaping me up to be who I am today, and the interns and GAs and assistants that I have and the classes that I speak at, hopefully I can give them some tidbits and a little bit of advice as to how to be successful as best as possible, I guess I would say.
I've never reached out and regretted it. Right. I've never sent
Yeah.
that text and regretted it.
Exactly. That's a good way of looking at it. That is definitely a good way of looking at it.
Well, I mean, I think it just makes all the difference in the world too, right? And it's just a quick check-in with a friend or somebody you haven't spoken to in a while. And I think to what you said too is just even communicating, right?
Yeah.
And the relationship balance is tough, but like if you can just tell somebody, hey man, I'm kind of going through it right now. Like we're in the middle of the season, I don't really have the time, and it's not that I don't appreciate you, but like if I'm not reaching out as much, it's because I've got to focus on my own thing. I feel like that communication goes a long way.
Oh yeah, for sure. For sure.
Yeah. It's funny. As a quick side note, I think about like the wedding invites, right? Like I have somebody who is a good friend of mine who I know is not going to come to the wedding, but he just will not RSVP no. He keeps being like, no, I'm going to try. I'm like, dude, it's okay. Just tell me no. Like I'm getting more frustrated that you just not saying no initially too. And so if you could just communicate a little bit better, it makes all the difference.
Yeah. Now there's this moment that I look back on. Like there was a email that was sent to me, and I was just like hanging on to that email, just like the wedding RSVP. And it's just like, just type it back, just email back. And I'm like, no, I got to say the right things. No, it has to be right. Like I don't want it to be any miscommunication or like any gray areas. I'm gonna wait. And then like 2-3 weeks go by, and I'm like, why didn't I just send this email? Like, and now it's like I see the person and I'm just like, oh man, like,
That's
hey,
the worst.
I got your email. I'm sorry. Like, and it's like, just email them back. Just take the time, email them back. Again, doesn't have to be perfect. It does not have to be perfect. So
It's funny, kind of the mental gymnastics you can put yourself through, and then convincing yourself that like everything does need to be perfect. And it's like, no, I'd rather. It's just sometimes it's better just to send off a quick one right back. So
exactly.
Well, I know your work ethic, right? And I mean, for our listeners, you have one of the strongest work ethics I've ever seen out of coaches. And you alluded to it previously, with having to be there a long time, especially in a director role where you don't have 7 assistants like an SEC school, right? How are you able to balance your work and life? And how are you able to make sure that work ethic doesn't burn you out and it's something that can help fuel you and improve your career, but it's not something that becomes overwhelming for you?
Yeah, I'd say, as cliche as that other phrase is, when people say, if you love what you do, you never truly, well, they say if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life and everything like that. I think, if you have a lot of passion for what you're doing, you still can get burned out. Like as much as you want to try to balance out the timing, you know, how much you're giving to the job, how much you're giving to the athletes or wherever you're at, like you still have those moments of where you're feeling overwhelmed, and it's just really how you deal with those moments of being overwhelmed. But as far as work ethic goes, I've come a long way, I guess I would say. So I appreciate the compliment early on, but it wasn't always like this for me. And whether it was college or early on in my career, like in college, I was honest with that ESS class. Like, I didn't do the greatest in school. I didn't do the greatest early on. Like, if it weren't for football, like, who knows where I would have gone? Who knows what I would have done throughout that? But football kept me where I needed to be, I guess I would say. And then my first year with the Mavs, well, those years early on, it was kind of that work ethic was tested. Didn't really have one. I'd had one, of course, but it wasn't really one that was like always, go, go, go on edge. What can I do to succeed and everything like that? And, that was kind of one of the first moments where I learned mentor of mine taught me like never let them look at you sideways. And now I got a lot of quotes that I'm going to start saying just because there are things that help me, stay with this work ethic that I have, I guess I would say. But they taught me like never let them look at you sideways. And I looked at that as always being on your P's and Q's, you know, paying close attention to detail, trying to avoid mistakes or anything like that. And, not really letting people be like, we knew that was going to get messed up. We were just waiting on it, and that's something that I still stick with. That still sticks with me. Another thing was that I learned kind of in the tech area during the SBC area was staying on edge. Some people could look at that as like, you're always like frantic and everything like that. But I look at it more as like, how can I improve the situation that I'm in? How can I continuously help the organization that I am around, being steady but constant in your improvement? That helps me a lot. Looking back at those quotes, another quote is, another mentor of mine taught me. I wrote it down right here. If you have a passion for this field, which is serving, you never truly clock out. And again, that's similar to the staying on edge, just wanting to constantly improve the organization, the university, the student athletes as a whole. And then one of the final things that I still kind of hang my hat on is the quickest and easiest way to build buy-in and trust is to be available. Now I'm kind of learning, the further I get into my career, technically this being year 8, if I think about it, but the further I get into my career now is I took all those things too literal. And I think, I felt that like if I wasn't around, wanting to be available as much as I was, if I wasn't around, or always available, those relationships wouldn't be as strong or cultivated. Um, but then I started learning that could cause a lot of issues with your work-life balance. It can get a lot of issues with your mental health. It can cause a lot of issues with, your relationships, personal relationships, and just unknowingly pushing people away. People that you care about, pushing them away because of the thought process that I had on my hard work and my work ethic, those quotes that I said. But like I said, each of those things I kind of took too literal. I took way out of context a little bit. But hindsight's 2020, like I said. So you start to learn a little bit more about that. How can I continue to do those things, but change them to how I can be successful while using those still, and I think those are the things that I try to hang my hat on. Like I said, about my work ethic, those couple quotes are always the ones that I look back on, but how can I tweak them a little bit to where I'm still doing those things, but also taking care of myself, but taking care of my family, taking care of the relationships that I have in my life, you know?
It's a tough balance, man. And I think the tough part is to be successful as an intern or a GA or even a young assistant strength coach is to do all those things, right? And
Mhm.
like you said, take those quotes literally. Like I remember the reason I was able to be successful in those roles was because I was always available. It was because if you needed
Yeah.
somebody at 5 a.m., I would be there. Or if there
Yeah.
was a
Yeah.
recruiting visit at Sunday at 5 p.m., it's like, all right, I'm going to drop everything and I'm going to be there. And I saw and got rewarded for that constantly. And
Yep.
then as soon as I became a director of basketball performance or whatever, right, as a head strength coach, every other strength coach was like, no, stop doing that. Don't do that at all. And it's like, all right, well, what am I supposed to do,
What
man?
am I supposed to do?
Yeah.
It's no, it's a struggle because like you want to be that individual for people, but you got to remember to be that individual for yourself. You got to remember to be that individual for your loved ones, for your significant other, for your family, your mother, your sisters, brother, anybody. And I think that's, I always struggled with the balance side of it and not really believing in work-life balance because, like you said, if you get a call at 5 p.m. on a Sunday, it's like, okay, let me check. Oh, I'm good. I'll meet y'all up there. 5 a.m. It's like, yeah, I could be there. It's
Yep.
like, whoa, like it's gonna bite you in the butt later on, maybe. But just I learned you can't be everything to everybody. And that's what I learned early on, but also more prominently this past semester. With the 16 sports that I have, and we can go into that in a little bit, but can't be everything to everybody is what I've learned.
Mm. Well, I am curious about the 16 sports because it's a lot.
Yeah.
And I definitely want to go into it.
Uh,
You mentioned earlier that the strength coach is the defender of culture, right?
mhm.
And I think, especially being a director, it's almost your job to create the weight room culture as well. It's not just the team culture. You obviously want to incorporate that with what you're doing within the weight room, but what is the culture you're developing within your sports performance department?
Um, I just, there's a couple questions that I always ask myself at the end of every day, and it's, learned this early on in my career. I asked myself, did I serve? Did I inspire? Did I work hard? And did I compete? And I try to instill that into my athletes as well, as a cultural standpoint. But, along with those core values that I hold, I always want my athletes to understand that, there are 5 words, and I've been looking at them as like 5 pillars, essentially, and trying to, get that going here steadily. And the 5 words, I always try to want them to be consistent, passionate, prepared, relentless, and unselfish. And I think those 5 words coincide with each other in some way or fashion, um, whether it's on the court, on the field, in the weight room, in your classroom, outside of here. I think that if you can be labeled as one of those 5 words, um, I think you hold yourself to a higher standard. I think that gives you an opportunity to be like, oh, like we know what that person's about. We know that they're a good person. We know that they hold themselves to a high standard. We know that they have high character because they're consistent in everything they do. We know they hold themselves to a high character because they're relentless in their pursuit of succeeding or helping serve individuals. We know that they're a high caliber, high characteristic individual because they're unselfish in their pursuit of, helping others. And I don't think you could be one word without being the other 4 words. And that's something that I've, been steadily trying to incorporate here. There's also another quote by the CEO of Zappos. Um, I think his name is Tony Shea, if I'm pronouncing that right. But he says, uh, when an idea becomes part of a language, it becomes part of the default way of thinking. And that's a quote that I try to live by when I'm trying to instill culture. If it becomes part of the regular language, if you're saying it day in and day out, as much as people might be like, man, he's saying the same thing again. He's about to say the same thing again. And it might be mocking, but at the end of the day, it's like, you'll remember it. You're going to remember it. It becomes a default way of thinking. So if I'm always like, hey, let's make sure we're consistent in everything we do, make sure we're passionate and blah, blah, blah. And then it's like, man, he's talking about consistency. He's always talking about passion. He's talking about relentless. It's like, you remember the 5 words though, and that's kind of how I'm wanting to, focus on developing the culture. But I also learned that, getting here, a lot of these teams already had culture set in place. They already had what they were doing. And I was trying to figure out what can cause the biggest ripple effect, what smallest drop can cause the biggest ripple effect. And that's something that I'm still searching for, because like I said, a lot of the teams here had solid cultures in place and successful teams. And I'm just trying to figure out how I can help them in any way possible, I guess I would say.
Hmm. And I love the base. I love the 5 words. How are you getting the athletes to buy in? Like, I know you just mentioned it with a small drop creating a large ripple effect, but I mean, how are you getting these athletes to listen to you besides the language?
Um, I Early on, it was trying to fit a square peg in a round hole, but because of me, not because of the athletes, not because of the sport coaches or anything like that here. It was, me trying to use names to get my point across or to validate who I was as a strength and conditioning coach coming into it. Um, you know, Trying to use an example from the Dallas Mavericks or something like that, being like, oh, I worked with pros and blah, blah, blah. Like, just this mobility exercise works. You just got to trust it. And it's like, whoa, this, they, you name dropping is not going to do anything. Like, you name dropping is probably making them look at you worse, or something along those lines, which leads me back to what I said earlier was keep the message the same, change the delivery. A lot of these athletes here, like I said, the sport coaches have great cultures already in place, respectful students, respectful athletes, respectful individuals as a whole. And I think it was just one of those, towing the line of being available, being overly available, trying to build that buy-in and trust, but also like, oh, hey, I have this background. You should already trust it. And it's like, whoa, that you got to find that balance. You got to find how to tippy toe that line, because always being available, trying to force that or forcing it using what I know in the past, it's like those two things aren't working right now. How can you be a little bit more genuine? How can you be a little bit more, you know, trusting on both ends? And I think it's still a work in progress. I think it's just one of those, hey, this is where you were, this is where you're getting to, but it's at the end of the day, it's you. I look at the strength and conditioning aspect, my role as a providing a roadmap. Like I told my volleyball team this morning, I was like, me as a strength and conditioning coach, my role is to provide a roadmap to help you tap into your God-given abilities. And at the end of the day, I can give you sets and reps, X's and O's, things of that nature. And it's like, hey, this is going to help you, but I can't force you to do all these things to the level that I want you to do them at. But understand that this is essentially a roadmap to help you tap into your God-given abilities. And, you know, you can find it as you need, or, I can help you in any way possible. But then there's another little thing that I always say. It's like, we're building our foundation on concrete and not sand, and that's a Bible verse that I've seen around here a lot of times. It escapes me off the top of my head right now, but building our foundation on concrete and not sand. And I always tell the athletes, like, hey, I gave you the blueprint. Here's the roadmap. You can either use styrofoam and plywood and glue, or you can go down the street, work a little bit more, chop that wood, set that concrete, get that stone, and it might take you a little bit longer, but that foundation is a lot more solid now. So that's how I at least try to.
No, no,
hopefully,
no, no. I think it's
hopefully it
successful.
grasps.
Well, one thing I truly appreciate about you is learning from experiences, right? And then constantly improving and understanding that it's a process, right? And it's not, I love what you said earlier too. It's, what got me here isn't going to keep me here. I have to keep growing. I have to keep getting better. And I just love that mindset, because to me, that's where great coaches are truly coming from, is that mindset all the time.
Yeah.
Now, I have one final question for you, and this comes with the story. Okay. So for our listeners, everybody knows I was at Texas Tech previously. And then this is where we first met. And I remember Halloween's my favorite holiday. Okay. And so for me, this was like one of the toughest times, because the previous coach got fired for women's basketball.
Uh-huh.
We hired a brand new coach coming in, trying to set up a brand new culture, like the problems that we just talked about, right?
Uh-huh.
And then also being in the middle of October, women's basketball, 3-hour practices, just a tough time. We haven't played anybody yet. We haven't scrimmaged anybody. And it's like, we have got to get something done, right?
Uh-huh.
And just like stop playing against each other. Everybody's in a bad mood. And I remember I asked Coach, I was like, can we do a Halloween lift? And she's like, I just don't think right now is the time. And I was like, okay. And then I walk into the weight room at USA. It's this dark weight room, and I can like see you and John Riley dressed up as wrestlers, going through a full wrestling, script essentially, and it was fantastic. And I remember being on the outside, like touching the glass, like, if only this could be me. So, my question for you is who was your favorite wrestler and why?
I'd probably say who I dressed up as. It was Booker T. He was probably my favorite wrestler. In all honesty, that was all John Riley's idea. Like,
I'm sure.
We did this whole Halloween, spectacular just day, and everyone's looking forward to it and everything like that every year. Try to do that at all my other places as well, but he always did a partner costume. So he was like, "We're wrestling this year," and I'm like, "What?" He's like, "Yeah, I'm already gonna be this person. I need you to pick somebody." And I'm like, all right, Booker T. So he he goes to Party City. He was either Party City or the Spirit Halloween store. And I remember he's FaceTiming me, and he's like, "Which wig do you want? Which one do you want?" And like, he's like, "This one or this one? This one?" I'm like, I didn't even know who I'm gonna pick yet. And so I get the wig and everything like that, and I'm like, all right, I'm gonna be Booker T. And little did I know we had this whole ring set up and everything like that. I was like, I thought we were just gonna lift, take pictures, have fun. And we had a whole 5-minute actual wrestling match, and that was something
unique experience.
That was something unique, but that's something that athletes are always going to remember. I try to do that at every place that I've been. It doesn't really fall in the right weeks, because that's always the beginning of the basketball season. Like you said, you're either having a scrimmage or you're about to go into your first week of games, and it's like, we want to make sure we're serious, but it's also like, okay, let's have a little bit of fun, So I try to do that with all my teams here, or I always dress up. I do 2 or 3 days because that's what Riley always did. So that final day is always the biggest day. So
I remember Scott came up to me. Scott, my assistant at the time, came up and he was just like, "You wish that was you, huh?" I was like, "Damn, man, come on."
It's
about having fun.
Yeah, it's about having fun. It's about making memories. It can get monotonous being in that weight room, doing the same exercises, doing the same. You're in, you're out, you're in there for an hour, and it's like, no, I want to keep this still joyful. I want to have fun. That also gives me an opportunity to kind of be like, okay, let me express my creativity, and it's like, let me see what some people are gonna dress up as, and I've seen a lot of crazy things in the past from different athletes, different sports, but it's always been a hit. It's always been a hit. So
it's awesome. It is. Sure. It's not taking yourself seriously. It's just having fun, and I love it.
Exactly.
Well, thank you for coming on, man. I really appreciate you. It was good to catch up with you selfishly, right? But then for our listeners to learn something today too is always great. If somebody wants to follow you on social media, what would be the best way to do that?
It'll be my full name, so Oliver Houston IV, so IV. I do have some dashes and maybe some underscores in there. Off the top of my head, I don't know. But if you Google or if you look up Oliver Houston IV, you'll find me. My picture might be me yelling, or it might be me with a towel, something like that. Or you'll find me. Hopefully, I was able to give y'all something to that'll help you, whether you're in this field or looking to get into this field, or even outside of this field. Hopefully, I gave y'all something to that you could take with you that can help you in the future.
You've got to send this to the ESS class, or I'll find a way to send it.
I got you. I don't know if I'll be speaking at another one. Hopefully I will be, but great kids, but hopefully I'm able to leave them with something better than, to begin with.
I'm sure you did. I promise you did. Well, thank you, man. I appreciate you.
Yeah, of course, Connor. I appreciate you as well.